Hi, everybody. Today, it's such a great honor for me to be here. I am at the HSUS with the head honcho, President and CEO, Wayne Pacelle. I can't believe I'm here. This is such an amazing thing for me. So I'm so grateful you're here, Wayne. And every day when I read the website, watch the videos, all I want to say to you is thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much for what you do. I get choked up,
well,
because
it's a life passion for me, for whatever reason, animals and trying to live well and really be a conscious consumer has just always been in me. So I'm glad that you are doing the important work you are to raise these issues and make these connections.
well, that was one of my first questions to you. Is you went to Yale, and I'm sure that the sky was the limit, and you could have had a nice cushy office in Manhattan or Hong Kong or anywhere. Why did you choose to have a life where you wake up in the morning, it's a siege from the crack of dawn, and it just goes on and never seems to end?
Well, it's funny. I was just speaking to some students last night, and they were asking me about career advice. And I said to them, I said, follow your heart. I said, I was never really consumed with the idea of making money, although I'm not against people making money by any stretch of the imagination. But it burned inside me when I learned what was going on with animals. I simply just thought it was unfair. It was a misuse of power. It was beneath us. It really did not show our ability to problem solve or be creative. It was just this might makes right mentality. And whether it was food production, or whether it was entertainment, or whether it was fashion, or whether it was just random acts of malice or indifference to animals, I just said, I don't want to be a bystander. In the face of the problems that I've been able to see, I want to help turn them around. And, one of the things that is when you really do have a perch like mine where you see the full range of problems that humans cause for animals, it's hard not to be drawn to the food production system
Yeah.
because so many animals are caught up in that system. And you think this is the one that we control the most because we're making these choices on a regular basis in our lives. And are we going to make the right choices? Are we going to make informed choices? Are we going to be conscious? Are we going to be constantly trying to improve? Or are we just going to kind of go with the flow and just kind of eat what's put in front of us or what's
Right.
convenient? And I thought that we're better than that option, and it ties into so many issues.
Well, do you think one of the reasons why things just sort of keep going the way they are is just because they've been that way for so long? I think very few people understand that when they purchase a pork loin or when they purchase a pork chop or a hamburger, that has an entirely, like a whole life of its own that goes back and it ends with the animal, maybe in a gestation crate or suffering abuse or being thrown into a pen or never being able to move its entire life.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand that they can change that by buying something else.
Yeah.
If they eat vegetables or something, they don't contribute to that abuse.
Well, it's an odd circumstance for us in terms of our basic nature because, this little cliche, we're creatures of habit. We really are. I mean, we develop patterns of behavior, and I think it's harder as you get older to change those patterns. Younger people can break those patterns more readily, but as you get older, it's a little tougher to break those patterns. At the same time, I mean, look at our society now compared to 10 years ago, compared to 25, compared to 50, 100. We're a constantly changing, evolving society. I mean, we look back historically on social relationships and social issues. I mean, going way back to the days of slavery, to child labor, to women being denied the right to vote. We look back like, how could that have been? How
Exactly.
could conscious, aware people tolerate that condition for so long? But we have this incredible capacity to rationalize our behavior and to excuse the current situation or to exhibit short-term thinking or just look look at things through one lens like economics. And I think that for us as individuals, we if we're serious about our opposition to cruelty and we're serious about having this planet be healthy for the long run and have sustainability, and if we're serious about our own personal health and well-being, physical and emotional, I think we've got to make conscious choices. And it doesn't lead you to have to be perfect in every realm. My metric at HSUS is not are we perfect, but are we moving in the right direction? Are we making choices that reflect a conscious awareness of animals, the environment, our health? And I just feel that the case for eating more plant-based foods and being a conscious eater is overwhelming. I mean, if you look from a global planetary health perspective, from a personal health, from a public health perspective, from an animal welfare perspective, all of these things run together. And I just think that it's something that we control. We're making these choices. It's not somebody else who's, pulling the marionette strings. We're the ones.
Mhm. Now, a lot of people, I don't think, understand how what they eat affects the environment and affects the global, wellness of this planet.
Yeah.
Can you explain to us a little bit about how meat and the environment are completely related?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, think of animals as they are, as Frances Moore LePay said 40 years ago when she wrote a book, Diet for a Small Planet. She said animals are protein factories in reverse. They require a lot of inputs, take a lot of plant matter and turn it into a small amount of animal protein. And, if you're in a grass-based system or a pasture-based system, then the animals are utilizing kind of the bounty of photosynthesis and the land, and there's not a tremendous amount of inefficiency there. But if animals are being fed grains, if you're growing the grains to feed to the animals, corn and soybeans, it takes 12 or 13 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of beef. The ratios are different for other species, and they're a little bit better than they are for beef. But there is a lot of inefficiency there. So it means you're putting more land into cultivation, which means more fossil fuel use to drive the machinery. It means more pesticides. It also, when you talk about the number of animals used in our society, 9 billion in the United States for food, all of those animals are producing waste. It's all untreated waste. We're 317 million Americans, and we have septic systems, we have sewage systems. We treat most of the human waste and detoxify it. The animal waste isn't detoxified, so it's going into lagoons, it's going into streams, it's going into the air. That's a real environmental issue. And then I think at the biggest level, there have been a number of reports by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and others that show that anywhere from 14.5 to 51% of greenhouse gas emissions relate to animal agriculture globally.
From the methane that's
It's
coming
from the energy
waste.
use, from cultivating the crops to the other energy inputs, to the methane and the expelling of gases from the animals directly. All of those things, when you add them all up, contribute to an enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And this is obviously a great threat in terms of warming, Arctic regions not having as much ice, so many different issues, sea level rise. So I think, you can look at this in terms of our per capita animal product consumption leading to high rates of heart disease and certain types of cancer. You can look to the overuse of antibiotics on our factory farms, which is leading to the growth and development of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. You can look to the animal welfare problems, which you mentioned, the confinement of animals on factory farms. These are all moral problems. If you're a serious-minded person and climate change is a real thing for you, if you're serious about protecting the environment, if you're serious about animal welfare, I think we've got a moral duty, even if it's difficult because it requires something of us to make changes in our lifestyle. I think intellectual honesty demands that we do take a serious look at this.
Mhm.
It's very easy to be for something far away, right? I
Right.
mean, I want to protect the rainforest in the Amazon. I want to protect the rainforest in the Congo. I want to protect the oceans. Great. I mean, we all want to do that, but it relates to daily decisions that we're making.
Yeah, yeah. And I think so few people understand what actually happens to get the meat to the table. And one thing that I wanted to ask you, because I know it bothers me, I know it bothers you, but with the billions of animals that you're talking about that are slaughtered every year for our food, how many of them go to waste? How many of them are never
God,
eaten?
yeah. Well, this is a big concern of mine. I mean, 40% of all food in the United States is wasted. 40%. I mean, you think of the billions of pounds of food, and you think of hungry people,
Mm-hmm.
you think of all of the energy inputs that go into this, and you think of the animals themselves who are raised to be killed for human food. we can have a debate in society about whether it's appropriate to raise animals for food. I don't think we can have any debate they shouldn't be raising animals and putting them through torment and suffering to then throw them away.
Right. So why?
22% of all animals raised for food are thrown away
And how can that be? It sounds preposterous.
because of a profligate society. When I was a kid, and I grew up in a lower middle class household. I mean, the ethic from my parents, which was not driven by anything except, good economic decision making, was clean your plate.
Right.
And I must say, through the years, I'm sure that I haven't always honored that principle, but more and more I am honoring it, and I'm consuming smaller portions of food. I'm really not trying to waste. I think what's in the refrigerator and what do I need to get through before it spoils. Because when you add all of these millions and millions of decisions that we make and all of the waste, my God, it's a moral problem. It's a serious moral problem for us.
Now, with that said, how does my decision as an American consumer affect the global economy, the global food supply? How do our everyday choices affect the globe?
Mm-hmm. Well, we Americans really set the tone globally in a lot of ways, and we represent a large portion of global consumption. We have 317 million Americans. We're the third largest country in the world by population. We're one of the top 5 by physical land area. And we have this incredible sort of leadership effect throughout the world. A lot of our technology is kind of modeled and copied from the United States and put out into the rest of the world. So we have the second highest per capita meat consumption in the world after a tiny European country called Liechtenstein. And we're eating about 220 pounds of meat products every year.
Per person.
Per person. So when you think of 317 million times 220, I mean, you're talking billions.
Mm-hmm.
So that has alone the capacity to affect the globe in terms of these greenhouse gas emission issues and public health issues for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And it's just a lot of animals. I mean, we slaughter more animals in the United States every year than there are people on the planet. I mean, it's an incredible number. There's 7 billion people on the planet, but we're slaughtering 9 billion.
And not even eating 20% of them.
Yeah, we're not even eating 22% of them, and we're wasting them and throwing them away. So if we could just reduce our consumption from 9 billion to 7 billion, which is really just people not wasting,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we'd get there right away. If people just decided we're not going to eat meat on Mondays, 1 day a week, then we can knock another billion off that. We could have a 1/3 reduction in the number of animals raised for food. And then for those people who are eating meat, and if they're going to more humanely produced methods of animal production, you're actually valuing the product a little bit more. You're not supporting a factory farm, and you're putting a little money in the pocket of someone who's raising animals in extensive systems and giving them a decent life, compared to supporting an operation that is confining the animals within a warehouse. The animals never get to see the sunlight or feel soil beneath their feet.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because now there's a bunch of bills trying to be passed through the Senate and the House that are concerning the confinement of these animals. And we have what's called gestation crates. So can you inform my viewers about exactly what they are and what they mean to the whole
Sure,
system?
yeah. Well, gestation crates are a tool that pig producers use specifically for the breeding sows. So a lot of the time the females have it the worst in animal agriculture because they're not just used for their meat, but they're used for their reproductive potential and output. So cows are used for milk, hens are used for eggs, and the breeding sows in the pig industry are used for their offspring. So they are confined in a small cage, really 2 feet wide, so just about as wide as my shoulders, 7 feet long, because these pigs are big animals. They're 350, 450 pounds. And essentially all they can do is take one tiny step forward, one tiny step back for a 4-month period when they're in the crate. Then they're moved to another crate, which is basically the same size. And then they give birth in that crate. They're immediately re-impregnated, put back in the other crate. So they can endure essentially 3 years of extreme confinement where they're immobilized. So I don't care if you're a vegan or a vegetarian or an inveterate carnivore, wherever you are on that eating spectrum, it is deeply, deeply wrong to treat an animal that way.
Yeah.
A conscious, feeling, thinking creature with legs, with needs.
Nervous system.
Yeah, I mean, just put in a place where they can't move.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine if you or I were stuck in a closet and we were left there for, you know, 3 years. I
In the
mean,
dark.
it's, yeah, if they ran some food by us and slipped some water under the door, I mean, it'd be a horrible, miserable existence. And I just think that, most people don't support this. I mean, every survey that we've seen, whether we've initiated it or some third party group like the Farm Bureau's initiated it or an independent polling operation, the public doesn't go for this. They don't think
Right.
it's appropriate to confine animals so severely. So I don't think that we're doing anything radical by saying don't confine animals in tiny cages. I think we're simply affirming what people's natural instincts are, which is to let animals be animals. And if you're going to raise animals for food, at least don't torment them.
Yeah.
Don't throw them away.
Yeah.
Don't confine them in a box that is barely larger than their bodies.
Well, that's one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about was because, continuously, whether it's with animal agriculture, whether it's with dog fighting, whether it's, I mean, if you asked any person on the street, they'd adamantly say,
Yeah.
this is wrong, this must stop.
Yeah.
How does this keep going on and on and on? And why is
Mhm.
it so hard for you to help get laws passed that stop it?
Well, I mean, a few things. Number one, I think, partly because of HSUS, we're seeing incredible changes. I mean, we're getting chimps out of labs. We've made dogfighting a felony in every state. We've had 60 major food retailers from McDonald's to Costco to Cracker Barrel say we're not going to buy pork from operations that confine the sows. And I could go on. I think we're making a lot of progress. At the same time, you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar industries that are powerful and have their own defense mechanisms. And we're dealing with this incredible panoply of issues. I mean, if we could concentrate just on one issue, I mean, I think we could run so many of these things to ground. But we at HSUS, we've got more than 100 major campaigns at once. I mean, there are many different sectors of animal agriculture. There's meat birds, and then there's chicken and turkey, and then you've got the laying hens for eggs, and you've got the pork industry and cattle and other sectors, and then in entertainment, you've got dog fighting and cockfighting, wild animals in the circus. I mean, I could just go on and on. I think it's the number of targets, the number of problems that is a complicating factor. And I think the other issue is scale. When you're dealing with these big interests that have been able to fend off change for many years, the only way you're going to succeed is by really bringing a lot to the table in terms of pressure. What HSUS brings, frankly, we can do undercover investigations, we do litigation, we have expert lobbyists, we have medical doctors, we have veterinarians, we have program expert issues. We are tackling these problems from so many different directions and mobilizing millions of Americans to turn these problems around. That's why you're seeing the success. And I think that what our movement needs more than anything is an organization with the power and scale to attack these problems. That's what we're trying to build here at HSUS, which doesn't mean that I diminish small grassroots groups. I mean, we're working with them hand in glove, and those groups are vital because none of us can do this alone, but there must be a group that can bring enough to the table to turn around some of these big problems.
Now, for me, I think, okay, well, one way we can answer this problem is we can make television commercials that are out there just like the meat industry gets to put out, whatever. But we say, hey, Mr. Guy who's watching the Super Bowl eating your wings, this is where your wings came from. Hey, hamburger eater, this is where your hamburger came from. To me, this seems very simple because we could reach millions of people at a time, and it would become part of our society every day that we see.
Yeah.
Why can't we do that? Who's stopping us from doing that? Why can't we advertise the way that other people get to advertise?
Well, car companies, beer companies, and others that advertise do so because then those advertisements are leading to revenue generation, which is leading to profits, and they then cab a portion of their total revenues aside to advertise. We're not making money from it, so there's just not a revenue generating model for us. So you could spend $1 million, but then how do you get the next million? How do you get the next 10 million? How do you get the next 100? These companies are doing it on a huge scale. So I think it's a problem, and it would be great when more and more philanthropists, when
Right.
millionaires and billionaires decide that these issues are worthy enough for major investments, and that,
They don't need the return on their money.
well, or that, there a lot of people give to many worthy causes. They build hospitals, they fight disease, but I'm hoping we carve out a segment of high net worth individuals who recognize that animal cruelty issues are some of the most important moral questions our society faces, and that the collateral impacts, the environmental impacts from animal agriculture and the like, are also kind of a reinforcing argument to make these investments so we can educate the public. But I think underlying your question, Randy, is that people don't know about these issues, and we need to educate them about these problems in order to turn these issues around.
Well, when I become a high earning individual, I will come to you and we will make a commercial.
That's great. Well, I think it's great, and I think we're doing some, but we need to be doing a lot more.
Yeah.